At this point, I'd like to bust a persistent myth often used to validate doing nothing. The myth is that racism is human nature. It's not. We are not hardwired to perceive threat or inferiority and superiority in other races. Race being a social construct makes this supposed hardwiring an impossibility anyway. The following is a quote from the historian Dante A. Puzzo. Racism rests on two basic assumptions. 1. That a correlation exists between physical and moral qualities. 2. That mankind is divisible into superior and inferior stocks. Racism, thus defined by ideology, is a modern conception, for prior to the 16th century there's virtually nothing in the life and thought of the West that can be described as racist. However, at the end of the 15th century, Ferdinand II of Aragon, that's Ferdinand V of Spain, Isabella I of Castile, and Pope Alexander VI did some pioneering. This was the blue blood, or clean blood theory. It coincided with the defeat of the last Moorish king, Muhammad XII from the Almohad dynasty. This was in Granada in 1492. In the 17th century, scientific racism had taken off. Many who subscribed and contributed to it are now household names. Voltaire, for example. This timing, coincident with colonial aggression, is not a random accident of history. The enslavement and inhuman treatment of Africans needed to be justified. These were people with a long history and civilization, including within Europe. There were scientists, farmers, medics, craftsmen, teachers, rulers, architects and builders, soldiers, mathematicians, philosophers, lawmakers, and so on. A wholesale fabrication of savagery and inferiority had to be sold to the masses in Europe and then sustained. At this point, I'd like to introduce a concept. It's commonly encountered when discussing the reality of racism in this time. Cognitive dissonance. I'll be quoting Frantz Fanon, psychiatrist, philosopher, and author. Sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they're presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It will create a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable, called cognitive dissonance. And because it's so important to protect the core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit with the core belief. Most white people rest their understanding of racism on many strong core beliefs. The reality fundamentally challenges these beliefs. Cognitive dissonance is the common result. We've seen the stats, and we're up to date with some terms and definitions. We've also busted the myth of racism being human nature. Now let's take a look at our brains on racism.